Ethernet, so we shouldn't have Wi-Fi drops. We've got power. Unfortunately, we don't have a clicker because the hub doesn't put the
Now it's working. All right, please take a seat. We're going to get started in a minute or so. Now that my mic's working. If somebody at the doors could sort of yell out to the hallway that people should make their way in, I'd appreciate that. And we have a pretty full agenda, so I'm hoping not to lose too much additional time. There are lots of seats on both ends. All right, let's do this. My name is Lars Eckert. I chair the IETF. Welcome to the IETF 117 plenary in San Francisco. I hope your week's been good so far. I hope it's going to get better before we fly out. We have the usual sort of administrative reporting. As usual, there's a lot more information on the web. There's a bunch of URLs on the slide deck that you can click on if you want to know more about things. We're at the IETF, so the note well applies to this session and most other sessions we have here that are open. If you haven't seen this yet, and I have a person in the queue already, Eric. Are you testing the queue or are you? He's testing the queue. Okay, good. The queue's working. Thank you, Ecker. I always feel like I'm being pen tested when I see Eric showing up in the queue. Well, so we have a bunch of conditions that apply to your participation here. Some of them are related to IPR. Some of them are related to how you conduct yourself in the session. Basically, be nice to each other and keep it technical and impersonal if possible. If you can't, maybe you want to leave the room for a second until you can again. That would be very helpful. And there's some other things that apply to this meeting. You're being recorded. There might be photos taken and so on and so forth. Meeting tips, when you join Meet Echo, for those of you who are remote, your audio and video will be off when you join, and please turn them on when you get into the queue to make a comment or speak. If you have the ability to send us video, please do. It makes it a bit more personal. If you have a headset, please use that one as well. And there's more details on Meet Echo on the URL there. As I said, we have a pretty full agenda that consists of the host presentation, which will actually just be a quick host talk, I hear. The usual report from me and the IESG. Miriam is going to talk about the IAB work, Colin about the IRTF. Martin Thompson is going to give a report on how the NomCom is doing this year. We're going to hear from the LLC, from Jay and Jason. Glenn is going to talk about the trust briefly. Warren is going to have an announcement from the NOC about doing something security related to our Wi-Fi network at future meetings. We have 2 in memoriam sessions, unfortunately. And then we have the usual open mic sequence, this time IESG, IAB, and LLC board. Thank you everybody who made this meeting happen. That includes, as always, the Secretariat, the Meet Echo people, the NOC for the network, the LLC staff and contractors, the tools team, and the people who ran the hackathon. Thank you. Right, it's my pleasure to introduce Vaj Kompella from Nokia, who are the host. And as you know, while he makes his way up to the stage, we could not hold these meetings without continuous support from all of our hosts, especially our global hosts, which is our top tier supporters. And Nokia is one of them and has been for a long time. I'm very happy for them to do this here. Welcome, Baj.
Thanks, Lars, and thank you, everyone. I hope you're having a great time over here. It is our pleasure to continue to support the IETF because it's been remarkable what you guys have done over the last so many years. Clearly, the big testing time was COVID, and so congratulations on the protocols and all the work that you guys have done, and of course to the network service operators and the application writers and all who kind of held us all together when we couldn't be together. So I just want to give a couple of ideas. I think it's been about 15 years since the last time I came to the IETF. And so it's been a really long time. And I wanted to say a couple of things about what I've learned outside of the IETF. And the first thing I'll say is the protocol wars are over. IP has won. IP does everything, okay? We might have thought, you know, can we do voice? Can we do emergency calls? Can we do video? Can we do critical network infrastructure, rail signaling, air traffic control? Yes, you can do all of them. Okay, next question. So after we have settled that one question, the next big thing is if we're so dependent on this network, and I know this is going to trigger a few people, are we doing the right things from a security point of view? Because we've now bet our entire lives on the IP network, whether it's working from home, it's going to school, it's our entertainment, it's our communications, everything, shopping, whatever. It's all on this network. And so are we secure? And I know I haven't been to the IETF, but you know the features and all the stuff that I look at as we're implementing our products seem to be oriented towards end-to-end security. But we have these, and when I talk to our customers, they talk about these large surface areas that they have to protect. And so, you know, if I had the answer, I would start a BOF. But I want to know what you guys think about surface-to-surface security. And by that, I mean, and I'll give you an example. We see these DDoS attacks, and they launch from various networks. They're fairly small in that particular network. The aggregate of them in some network that is being targeted is pretty large. So the target feels the pain, but the other guys, they don't do anything to protect the one guy. And so is there something we can do in terms of protocols or whatever to sort of have what I call surface-to-surface protection? I'm just going to leave you a few questions. I'm not going to have answers for any of this. But I think it would be worthwhile talking about this. Security is uncomfortable when you talk to service providers, enterprises, and all. They don't want to talk about their vulnerabilities and so on. But I think this is important for us if we are really going to bet everything on this network. The second thing I wanted to say was I said forget about protocol wars. Protocols are dead, and you know I know this is not the right place to say that. But what I mean is we've solved a lot of problems, and we'll continue to solve them here. Okay, but you know, there's so many people using the internet, and not just the big I internet, but little intranets, enterprise networks, the cloud, and so on. And you know, we here, I mean, you guys are smart as heck, and you come up with all these great ideas, but all the guys who use the networks aren't necessarily that smart, or maybe they're smart, but that's not what they want to use their smarts for. The internet is a tool for them. And I think it's very important for us to think about how usable the internet can be, how from an operations point of view for the service providers, from a usability point of view, from a consumability point of view, is the internet that consumable? And again, as a simple analogy, you don't need to understand lithium-ion chemistry to drive an electric car. You don't need to understand BGP route policies to use the internet. And I think we've solved a lot of these problems, and it's almost like coming up with methodologies. I could say APIs, but I know you guys don't like that, into the network so that the network is more programmable. It may not be a task for this group, but a lot of you participate in other groups, and I think that's where we have to take all the stuff that we're doing over here to make it more accessible, to make it more usable, than kind of what we've been doing, which is the hardcore, get the protocols right, make them robust, and so on. So anyway, those two challenges, I guess, were the ones I wanted to leave you with. Think about security, because I'm betting my 401k on this network, and think about the operations side of things. All right, and again, thank you for everything that you guys are doing, and thank you for coming to this IETF, and hope you enjoy the rest of the week. All right.
Hang on 1 second. And we have, as usual, we have a beautiful plaque for you. And I think this is actually the one you could take home if you wanted to. Or we ship it, as you prefer. Do you want to take it? Or you want...
I live down the street.
Okay, do you want to take it home? Oh, there's a... Oh, this is your box. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks. So that was probably the most technical host talk we had in a while. So you raised the bar there quite a bit. And I thanked them earlier for serving the IETF as chair for L2 VPN, I heard, which my memory is very hazy of those days, but I don't think it was always the most easy of groups. So thank you for that too. We actually have another sort of a little award going to Nokia because we had the San Francisco Marathon on Saturday, and one of the Nokia engineers took like a couple hours to like go and win the half marathon, and then come back to the hackathon. So, Samir, I don't know if you're in the room. If you are in the room, we have a little something for you. You are. So our awesome secretariat made a finisher medal for him that's slightly oversized, I think. But, congratulations. Thank you. Thank you. So, those of you who are sending us engineers, so not only do you need to become global host, you also, if you can, win the medal for the IETF. Right? I also hear we bought all your photos, and you get the code, and you can like get them from online. If you haven't gotten the code yet, we're gonna send them to you. And thank you. That was when I heard about this, I'm like, wow. That is an achievement. I did one marathon a long time ago, and I didn't do any after, and there's a reason for that. So my highest respects for. I'm not going to compute the factor that I was slower than you. Right. That brings us to the IESG and chair report, which is pretty uneventful this time. So we're going to talk a little bit about participant statistics as usual, what the plan is for future meetings. So spoiler alert, Jay later on is going to tell you where we're going to be next spring. So stick around for that part. I'm not going to tell you, but Jay will. There's a bunch of things on IESG statements, announcements, and more things we have online. Those are the registration numbers, and this is the first time, as always, that I see this slide. So we had 1,550 registrations that combines both on-site and remote. You see, on-site we're just at 900. Which is pretty much 100 fewer than we had in Yokohama at this time. So this is like personally making me sad because I heard anecdotally from many people that they thought, lots of engineers were going to come because we're in the Bay Area where lots of companies have like big sites. didn't work out for some reason. We would love to hear from those of you who might have colleagues that couldn't come or didn't come, why that is, because we obviously have another meeting coming up, and we also need to have a chat about, what do we do about meetings in the US, because they were the ones that oftentimes actually generated a profit for us. And this one won't, as far as I know, and that is sad. We have a fee waiver program. As usual, the remote fee waivers are pretty robustly used. We granted almost 360, almost 250 were actually used. The chairs of the various task forces, meaning me and Colin, have a discretionary budget, and we offer in-person fee waivers out of those. I had 10 requests, I granted 9. Colin had 13, he also granted 9. And for the ANRW workshop, which doesn't usually happen at every meeting, but happens at the summer one, there was another 10 for the workshop. And we had 423 hackathon registrations, and I don't remember a curve, but that's almost half the overall in-person attendees. So I'm pretty sure this is a pretty high fraction. So well done to those of you who go to the hackathon, especially those of you who arrange the hackathon for us. It's becoming more and more popular for good reasons, right? Because open source and open standards really go hand to hand these days. And that's a very robust program that we're running on Saturdays and Sundays. So thanks for that. And as you might see for the pie chart, right, most people from the US, quite a few from China, Germany, and other European countries, and a lot of you in the heavy tail from all over the world. This is just a breakdown for on-site versus remote. You see we have, although we're in the US, we still have like almost a quarter, or actually more than a quarter of the remote participants also from the US. So that might be an indication that a lot of companies are struggling a little bit with travel this year. My company is no exception here. But the in-person attendance is, the usual, like slightly over half from the local place. This used to be the slide where we talked about, how many people do we have and what were the COVID cases. And this slide doesn't show the COVID cases, but as far as I know, we only had one report, and you have to take this with a huge chunk of salt, because very few people are testing, as far as I know, and probably even fewer people are reporting. So to the one of you who did do that and then hopefully followed procedures to isolate yourself, thank you very much. But our proposal, I think, from the IESG and LLC would be that because those numbers are getting more and more shaky going forward, we're not going to report those anymore. That's a proposal. What we did do this time, though, we are sort of breaking it down in the post-COVID period for the meetings that we had into on-site and remote. So you can see the total, we're actually pretty close to Yokohama, which was the last meeting, but we're trending a little bit down on the in-person participants. And those are the numbers for the IETF 117 are the numbers as of today, while the numbers for the other meetings are the final numbers. So, we might still pick up a few more registrations tomorrow and Friday. The ISG made a bunch of statements and announcements on ether types, on the RFC series working group chair. We currently have a feedback period out for a few of you who volunteered to be considered for the role of chair. Thank you very much for volunteering. If those of you who haven't seen this yet, want to give us feedback on the candidates, that would be appreciated. I think we're going to try and do a selection in August. I'm looking at Amy, and Amy's nodding. So in August, excellent. So you have a little bit of time to send us your feedback. Do it now while you're sitting there being bored. We had an appeal since IETF 116, so that's not great, right? The good news is some of us on the ISG met with Ted and Ellen earlier today or yesterday. My memory is very hazy, but I think we have a way forward to address the content of the appeal. So we're probably not going to go exactly with the proposed remedy that was in the appeal, but we have an alternative that seems to be acceptable to the people who raised that. And thank you very much for raising this. This is an appeal is not necessarily a bad thing. It helps us fix things that we missed. And in this case, it turns out we missed a few things. And we're hoping that the new statement on interim meetings is going to be serving the community better. There's lots more from other bodies in the data tracker. And as always, there's an IETF blog on the bottom that Greg runs for us. If you want to post a blog, talk to Greg. Greg, where are you? Over here. He's always happy if an author comes and wants to work with him. You don't need to be a long-time participant. We oftentimes now also had like newcomers that only attended a few times that wanted to share their impressions, and that's always very useful to those of us who've like been here a long time and don't quite remember how it was. It really helps us improve the newcomer experience, and also, you know, gives us feedback about what we're offering actually works for those of you who are new to your organization. Right. We also had childcare yet again. We've done this ever since we came out of COVID, I think. And the LLC is planning to continue this forward. So you can plan on this being available at every IETF. And we do hope you plan to use this. I hear the kids had a great time. I think we had, 8 families and 9 children this time. So pretty robust take up. And there's a few quotes that I also haven't seen yet, but I talked to some people personally, and I heard from at least 2 of them that basically the childcare enabled them, or at least made it much, much easier to participate here. So we're very happy to arrange that for people that can use it. And we're also very happy for those companies and organizations that support the childcare to make that available, because there is a cost associated to that, obviously, right? Mirja, this brings us to the IAB, and Mirja is part of the report. She's coming over there. And just for those of you who are going to be on stage later, some of these glasses are not clean, so take a look at your glass while you before you use it. Just like insider tip.
Thank you, Lars, for this good advice. My name is Mirja Kühleven. I'm the chair of the IAB, and I give you a very short report, hopefully. As always, you find the whole report online. It's uploaded in the proceedings or also on the IAB webpage. I just want to highlight quickly that we recently published 2 new RFCs giving some guidance about protocol design and protocol maintenance, which I hope you enjoy reading. And if you have any comments, let us know. You can send any kind of feedbacks to us, to the IAB directly, or to me if you want to talk to me or any other IAB member. The other exciting thing that's going on is that we are currently have 2 proposed programs that we want to open. IAB programs are a venue where we want to tackle a technical topic that we think is important, but we also realize that like we are only like a small set of experts, and we need external or other experts to help us with. So our IAB technical programs are a venue for the community, or to engage with the community to figure out topics. Specifically, the first program is tackling the topic on identity management, and we're trying to figure out, to understand a little the landscape there, trying to figure out if there's any work that's missing in the IETF, or if we can kind of connect the dots better together. And if we do that, the work will go into the IETF or wherever it belongs. But this is just a venue to have the discussion and understand the space. And the other program will be the e-impact program. It's also proposed at the moment. It's the outcome of a workshop that we had end of last year. And there was like a lot of input, a lot of interest, a lot of discussion is still going on. So we believe there is a need for a discussion venue in the community. Both of these programs are proposed programs, so we didn't decide on them yet, but I think it's very likely we will have them, because so far we got very positive feedback, but there's still time to give us feedback if you would like to give us feedback. Either send it publicly to the architecture discuss list, or for impact there's actually a separate mailing list, or send it directly to the IAB, or again, talk to me or any other IAB member. And this is the part where I say thank you for those people who are serving in different positions. So one of the responsibilities of the IAB is to care about appointments. Very exciting, very important as well. And this time we appointed Susan Wolf for the ICANN nominating committee. Big thanks for that, because that is a commitment where you really have to be engaged and costs a lot of time. We had really good candidates this time, and Susan is absolutely more than qualified, and thank you for doing it. I'm not sure she's here, but you can see her picture. And then we reappointed Laura Thompson for the ISOC Board of Trustees. That was also interesting, because this is a position where you usually get a couple of appointments, and we didn't. We only had her name. But this is because everybody is so happy with her. So we were really happy to reappoint her. She's doing a really great job over there, so, representing the IETF, but also helping ISOC with her expertise. So big thanks to her for continuing there. Also, we appointed Russ and Barry, reappointed Russ and Barry for the CCG, and Tim April to the RSEC. Thank you, everybody, for serving. So one little thing on my own as I'm standing here. Lars already mentioned blog posts, and I recently wrote 2 blog posts, which were a little bit related to what I'm doing in my IB position, but like I wrote them also with my personal thought on it or whatever. The 2 blog posts, one was about the last IETF meetings, so providing a little bit of a summary there, and the other one was about our retreat. I'm not sure if you read them. If you didn't, maybe you want to read them, but if you read them, I would really be interested if this was like helpful for you, or if you would have expected something else, or if you think like leadership or we should do this in general, if this is like a good way to communicate to you, or if you would like to see something completely different, let me know as well. So if you have any comments on the blog post, just send them to me personally, or to the IAB and the ISG, because, you know, that's kind of the framework around this where I wrote those blog posts, or you can also contact Greg Wood, who is our Director of Communications. And then just very quickly, one last point. So we have a couple of IAB meetings around this week. The IAB Open meeting was yesterday. It was really nice. We had a very good invited talk. If you haven't been there, just watch the recording. I really enjoyed it. There was the EDM program meeting this morning. You also missed that one, but there's a mailing list you can join. I guess there are minutes and whatever. And then there's the liaison coordinator office hours tomorrow at lunch. That's a new thing we started last time. This is just like a venue. You can talk to the liaison coordinators in case you have any question about liaison management, because there are usually a lot of questions. So just come by if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thanks. That brings us to Colin.
Okay, thank you. Closer, is that better? Okay, so as many of you will know, in addition to the research groups in the IRTF, we also run the Applied Networking Research Prize. The Applied Networking Research Prize is awarded to recognize the best recent results in applied networking. It's awarded to recognize interesting new research, interesting new ideas, which may be of potential relevance to the internet standards community. And it's awarded to recognize upcoming people who we believe are likely to have an impact on the internet standards and technologies going forward. We're very pleased to award this from the IRTF. We're very pleased to receive the support from the Internet Society, from Comcast and NBC Universal to make this possible. Very pleased to announce that we'll be making 2 ANRP awards tomorrow. The first of which will go to Simon Scherer for his work on modeling the BBR congestion control algorithm, which is a paper from the IMC conference last year. The second will go to Shiva Kakala for his work on automatically verifying the correctness of name server implementations. Really fantastic talks, I expect, really interesting papers. You can find the papers and the slides up on the website already. Please do come along to the IRTF Open meeting tomorrow to see those talks. And if you can't make it, the recordings will also be on YouTube. In addition, we also run the Applied Networking Research Workshop. This is an annual event which we run co-locating with the July IETF meeting every year, organized in cooperation with ACM SIGCOM. This took place Monday this year, Monday this week this year. Very pleased to say we got a fantastic program of talks, fantastic program of papers, really nice panel discussion, really nice keynotes. My very much thanks to Francis Yan from Microsoft, Maria Apostolaki from Princeton for organizing the workshop this year. Thank you to all the reviewers, the authors, and the speakers. Thank you also to the travel grant sponsors, Akamai, Comcast, and Netflix. We were able to bring a significant number of people to the workshop due to their very generous travel support this year. And again, if you missed the workshop, and I know there was pretty good attendance, the papers are all online, linked from the URL on the slide, and the talks are all up on YouTube. I'm also pleased to announce that the Applied Networking Research Workshop 2024 will take place this time next year. At I think it's the Vancouver IETF meeting next year. The organizers will be Simone Fellin from Red Hat, Ignacio Castro from Queen Mary University of London. Nothing on the website yet, but do look out at the URL there in the next few weeks for details of that workshop. And with that, I think I'm done. Thank you.
Next up, we have Martin Thompson, who is the NomCom chair for this cycle.
Yeah, fear me. Next slide, where we are. So the role of the NomCom is somewhat important in this organization. We're responsible for selecting leadership, all the fine folks you've seen up here today, and many more who you will see later. This year we have the usual number of IAB members up for reappointment. 2 art area directors in the usual slate. So expect to see an announcement within the next few days or weeks that outline how you can nominate people for these positions. And I encourage you to find as many people as you can to nominate, and also encourage them to accept that nomination, please. As of this morning, we have seated the NomCom after some multiple rounds of selections. We have everyone has managed to confirm their availability, and so you can see those people listed on the slide there. If you have any information that you would like to share with the NomCom, you can share it with me or any of the people that are on this screen. The people on the right will be the ones that are making decisions about who gets to be nominated. To give you a rough idea of where we expect things to be going in the next little while, the NomCom seated literally today. And between now and the next IETF meeting, we expect to do most of the bulk of the work that you expect of the NomCom, which will be asking for people to volunteer for the positions that we're looking to fill, asking those people about themselves and learning more about them through your feedback and interviews. And we hope to be able to send our nominations to the confirming bodies sometime around the end of the year. And ultimately the people will form part of those bodies and be seated at the March IETF next year. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
While Martin makes his way off the stage, can I ask those of you who are on the NomCom to stand up so the community can take a look and identify you as people? Thank you. Okay, this brings us to the LLC part of the plenary. Jay is here in person. Jason is online for his section as chair.
Thank you. As someone who currently lives in the UK, I can say without a trace of sarcasm how pleasant it is to be in such a warm and sunny city. So welcome to IETF 117. And starting off with our wonderful host, Nokia, who as well as being the host also sponsored the fantastic welcome reception last night. Thank you very much, Nokia. We're going to obviously set expectations now about all other welcome receptions, that they need to be as good as last night, and hopefully all of the global hosts will rise to that and they'll get better each time, really, so that'd be good. We are doing very well now with our set of gold sponsors. So we have these 3 categories: diversity and inclusion, running code and gold sustainability. And we have some committed companies now who are really very much supporting us here. So thank you very much to these 4 companies for their support. We're obviously very keen to take people's money, so we have lots of different categories here as well. We're not going to go as far as the others and have every little thing branded, don't worry. This is probably the set that we're going to work with. But so we have our silver sponsors and we have some bronze sponsors. So we really got, the one thing we'll notice later is that this is a relatively narrow set of industries, and we'll talk about it. But from that set of industries, we have some very committed people. So thank you very much also to our silver and bronze sponsors. Now, we've been poor at recognizing this in the past. We have a number of companies that sponsor us with donations of equipment, services, connectivity, food, various other things. And so, for example, I'm just going to call out Callas on this. So they have, for many years, donated to us a lovely piece of PDF server software that is used by the RPC to generate the PDFs and things. And it's you know, several $1,000s a year, but they've been doing it for many years and not asking anything, giving us full support. So these companies here really do deserve some thanks because they're donating directly to the IETF for our support. Thank you. Now, this organisation, this meeting would not run without the many generous volunteers. There was a very successful and very well attended code sprint on Saturday, and the NOC, as you can see, has increased in size, and the average age, I believe, has finally dropped below 50, so we're doing very well now with that. So thank you everyone to all of the code sprint volunteers, the NOC, and of course the NOC's organisations who support them coming along. Thank you. The team, as you know, there are a number of people involved in this. So we have the secretariat staff who are the ones doing the bulk of the hard work, running things around. We have the Meet Echo team, who you won't necessarily see so much, but are working from early morning right the way through, constantly watching everything and tweaking things as they go through. We have our tools contractors who work in the background of things, and we have our NOC contractors who are the ones that have to climb up, fit the things, make sure a lot of the wireless works and all of that kind of stuff, and get things to on site and stuff. So thank you very much to all of these people here. This is the IETF Administration LLC. This is our staff. Since the last time we presented, we have 2 new members of staff. So we have Jennifer Richards, who's a senior developer. Jennifer's been working for us as a contractor for a number of years and is now working for us directly. And we have Debbie Sasser, who's our director of finance, to ensure that we keep our finances going. Obviously, some of you are going to suggest that you know, we're now building an empire. An empire is like 500 people. Don't worry, this is really not very. Okay, so thank you very much to all of the staff, even though I'm on that slide. Thank you. And then finally, thank you to our global hosts. These are the ones that donate to us every year. They sign multi-year contracts, and that gives us a lot of the financial stability and the industry support that we need in order to operate, and also give us a good way to be able to talk to other organisations by these organisations demonstrating their support. So thank you very much. Right, so IETF 118 later this year will be in Prague. This is the last time we're going to go to Prague for some time. It's got too expensive for us, I suspect, for us to go, you know, some more years into the future. So I expect all of you there, everybody who's ever been to Prague, to come along, everybody who's ever been to an IETF meeting, okay? Ideally, if we can get about 3,000, that should help cover the, you know, the bills that we've had over the last few years with our other meetings. So that'd be fantastic if you'd all come along. Thank you. So now I'm going to talk about IETF 119. Now, I'm sorry to disappoint Lars, but we're not going to have a spring meeting next year. No, instead we're going to have 2 summer meetings because we are going to Brisbane in Australia. for IETF 119. And we are obviously very interested in host and sponsor opportunities, both for IETF 118 and IETF 119. Sorry this has taken so long. IETF 119 will be in a conference centre, and conference centres are just the most difficult people in the world to negotiate with. We have to make a trade-off of ensuring that we can go to sufficient cities and different cities, and in order to do that, sometimes that means dealing with the devil. So that's the only way forward. But this should be a great meeting. We have finally got everything sorted. So look forward to seeing you all there. Right, this is our list of upcoming meetings. The one thing you will notice is that the host column looks a little bit stark here. We are, as you know, I think the industry is going through a bit of a difficult patch in some places. We are relatively strongly exposed to a small number of industries, and so we are trying to expand our set of global hosts as well to go beyond our ordinary industry so that we can weather some storms a little bit better. But at least 2 of these are under discussion with people, so hopefully this will be filled not too far off into the distant future. For IETF 114, we are looking at North America. We have heard your concerns about visas and problems about entering the US. We are looking at the US. We are also looking at Canada, and we have looked at Mexico as well. It is that work is still ongoing anyway, so we will see where we end up with that. For IETF 125 in Asia, we recently did a consultation on a number of cities that we might possibly consider going to: Shenzhen, Beijing, Kuala Lumpur, and Istanbul. The IETF board is still considering that, and at some point we'll make an announcement about how we intend to go a bit further with that. So that's pretty good stack of things now. We have some, I think, organised beyond that as well, but we've largely caught up from the COVID issues. The rescheduled meetings are all now going to work their way through, and so we can get back to a normal planning cycle for IETF meetings. Okay, one of the goals that we have is long-term financial sustainability, and the main way we wish to do that is by growing the IETF endowment. We have a goal of 50 million by 2027, and currently we're at about 4 million. We have some donors that are giving large sums to us. So Aaron have given a large sum to us. The Internet Society, of course, gives us a very large amount each year, and RIPE NCC are giving us a large donation spread over a number of years. This year we've had LACNIC give us a donation, or last year possibly, and each of these donations is matched by the Internet Society. So that's a building, you know, a healthy endowment. Obviously, we're still 46 million short, so we do need a little bit more money, and we do have a number of ways forward on that. AFNIC, the CCTLD for France, has recently pledged 20,000 euros to the endowment. Comcast has pledged $10,000 to the endowment, and we've raised just $4,000 from individuals. We're going to be doing some more things as well that help individuals consider supporting us as well. So thank you to all those people, and that's how we're growing our endowment. Now, one of the things that we've discussed before is trying to move towards net zero IETF operations. And we've had a project that's been going for a little while to build a calculator that works for us. And we've now done some calculations using that for IETF 116. And we are considering the options for offsets of our carbon emissions, or our equivalents of carbon emissions. We very much recognise that this is a technical organisation, and that if we went and bought financial credit somewhere and all that kind of stuff, then, you know, I would never hear the end of it. So we are looking at, you know, more technical based projects and those type of things, and how we can do this, more direct things. If any of you have any ideas, or if any of you in your organisations have experts on these type of things, we would love to talk to them and hear about those things to understand how we can do that. There is a side meeting on Thursday at 8:30 where we want to talk about this more, if anyone's free to come along. Okay, that's it from me, and over to Jason Livingood, the board chair.
Great, thanks very much. Wish I could be there in person, but I am very busy doing some technical trials right now, and so look forward to the next meeting. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
You want to do it?
Sorry, we were gossiping. Sorry.
So no changes here on the board members. These remain the same. Next slide. So current work, really three key areas. We held in June, early June, a strategic planning retreat. We do this annually, really just to refresh, key risks to the organization, review work that's been completed and our priorities for the coming year. And out of that, the two areas of focus that we remain keeping on the radar. One is financial focus. We've made progress there, obviously with Debbie joining the team. The objective there is not just fundraising progress, but also the timeliness and accuracy of financial statements. And pleased to see that we're making some strides there. So that's important from our standpoint on the board. And then the final item is that as we looked through when certain board terms were ending, it became apparent that we may have sort of a unhealthy number rolling off at the same time. And so we're studying that to make sure that we have the sort of timings correct. And if we do, then trying to come up with some alternatives so that we don't lose a significant chunk of the board all at one time, because that would be disruptive for the organization. So more to come at the next meeting I think. Next slide, please, Jay. These are the upcoming board meetings. We always encourage people to come, and it's a rare thing when people actually do, but please do join. These are always open, and the majority of the agenda time is open. Next one. This is the current snapshot of the fiscal year operating budget. At the bottom, most of this change is a slight reversal of the investment returns just based on market conditions, because we're not, really pulling any of that funding out of our investments. This isn't that important, just in the same way that the losses last year when the market was down were not important, because we're not actively, selling those things. We're just adding to our investments. And you can take a look here at the revenues and expenses. And this is as of April, so it's just after the last meeting. You'll see this catch up and become a little bit more current over the next couple of months. And just one note here, I think Jay, you mentioned this earlier, and certainly Lars did when he reviewed a list of registrations by meeting. That remains challenging for us to forecast revenue around meetings, because the registrations are fluctuating, and it's not apparent that we have a stable new pattern just yet. Next slide. And of course, these are all of the many ways that you can contact us. Feel free to reach out if you like. Next slide. And that's it for us. I think now we're on to Glenn Dean for the trust.
Thanks, Jason and Jay. Glenn, you're up for the trust.
Hi, everybody. I'm Glenn Dean, and I'm the chair of the IETF Trust. There's 5 trustees. These are the 5 that are currently serving. I'm not going to read out their names. They're awesome people, though. The purpose of the IETF Trust, for those who aren't familiar with us, we're somewhat unseen typically. We have the joyful duty, the fun duty of enforcing trademarks and holding the copyrights on all the materials like the RFCs. So we do the IP, the intellectual property part of the IETF, to the other IP that we all work on. We're also pretty boring, and if we're ever exciting, we're not doing our job properly. So the two big updates are that we have we worked with two parties since our last time together, which were infringing upon the IETF logo. We talked to them very nicely. They talked back to us very nicely. They said, sorry, we'll stop doing that. And we didn't have to get any lawyers involved. It was a very successful and very cooperative engagement. But we did enforce it on two parties. And the other thing we're doing is we're restructuring. For those who aren't aware, we're restructuring the trust from a Virginia trust into a Delaware not-for-profit corporation. We've created the corporation back in December, and we are going through the process right now with the IRS to get declared the 501c3 nonprofit status. And once that's been granted by the IRS, we'll actually begin the nasty work of actually transferring all the licenses and assets we own over into the new entity. And so all those other gray boxes will hopefully start becoming green. We have office hours tomorrow if you want to come talk to us. We did this in Yokohama as well. Please come talk to us. You know, I know it's in the morning. You have to get up early on the last day of the week, and we're all tired, but we would like to see people come up and say hello. Anyways, it's going to be content till 7 around the corner, and 9:30 to 10 a.m. tomorrow. And finally, if you want to get in touch with us, here's our email addresses. We also have a website. You can just get us off the trustee website or this. And that's it. Thanks.
There's Martin Thompson in the queue. We don't typically do open mic for the trust because they're very boring usually, but since everybody's been very good in sticking on time, Martin, if you have a question, I'm willing to give that to you.
I have a request for the trust. Currently, the IETF license for RFCs forbids the creation of derivative works outside of the IETF, which would make forks of any of the documents produced here impossible under those terms. I would like to request that the trust consider loosening those terms to enable the generation of forks of the work that we do here.
We'll think about it. That's a very complex issue. I will point out you can reproduce RFCs in their entirety. That's a granted license that everyone has. And of course, you can use them in your work. But to create derivative work outside the IETF gets into some interesting issues with potentially enabling other SDOs to use our work without our permission. And that does create some issues. I think we would need a larger consultation than just the trustees themselves would have to be involved in that. Certainly the ISG, the IB, and the whole community.
It sounds like you've got a fairly good grasp of the sort of things that need to happen. I'd like to request that you do that. Thank you.
We are trying to be boring, and that's going to make us very not boring. So that's undermining the goals.
All right. Next up, we have Warren Kumari, who is wearing the knock hat here, I think.
So I want to make sure that we have time for open mic, so I'll go through this fairly quickly. So this is a proposal from the IETF NOC, which we've discussed with the IESG and ALC, and we wanted to get community feedback. So basically what we would like to do is we would like to move from using 802.1x to using WPA. And a note, when I'm saying 802.1x, I'm actually meaning, WPA2 enterprise with radius. And when I'm saying WPA, I'm meaning WPA2 and WPA3. So what is the plan? It's largely this. We turn off 802.1x and we turn on WPA. And why do we want to do this? Well, largely it's to make the user experience better. Currently, when you connect to the IETF network, you're connecting to an SSID called IETF. But 802.1x uses certificates, and so you get this certificate. And because you can't get a certificate for an SSID, the certificate is actually for services.meeting.ietf.org. And there's no real reason why your machine should trust that. So what we had been doing is we were taking the certificate and we were publishing it on the service called 802.1xconfig.org. And the theory was people could install an app on their phone before they came to the meeting and download the certificate and put it in their certificate store. But as far as we could tell, nobody ever really used that, and the service went away. So another thing we tried is we tried publishing the certificate fingerprints online, and we would put them on the meeting page and we would email them out. And as far as we can tell, nobody was checking those either. And the reason for that is for at least one meeting, and I believe a couple of meetings, the certificate fingerprints were just wrong. We updated the meeting number, we forgot to update the fingerprint. Nobody ever came along and told us, oi, your certificate fingerprint's wrong. You all aren't checking them. Also, increasingly, people have managed laptops and managed phones, like corporate managed devices, and they just don't have the authority to install certs. This means that people can't use 802.1x, and certain operating systems make it fairly tricky to try and configure this at all. So we're trying to make it easier for users. We usually have 2 or 3 tickets per day related to I can't join the IETF network. Obviously more towards the beginning of the meeting, but throughout. As an example, for Android, you have to configure the security type and the EAT method and the phase 2 authentication and tell it to use system certificates and not to verify them and then enter this long domain. That's just too hard. So if this is such a bad idea, why did we start doing it at all? Well, when we launched 802.1x, or I guess when we started doing 802.1x in the meeting network, it was in the days of WEP. We have now gone through moving from WEP to WPA, WPA to WPA2. There's now WPA3. And we believe that WPA3 is super good enough and that WPA2 is more than good enough. Also, over the past 5 or 6 years, there's been a huge increase for people moving to encrypted layer 3 protocols, right? Everybody's running TLS. Let's Encrypt has made a huge difference with that. We also have things like, DO and DOT and those sorts of things. And so we believe that even if somebody was able to decrypt the wireless network, there's other layers that are still encrypting the important parts of the data. When we started this as well, we were concerned about the evil twin attack, somebody coming along and standing up a fake version of the IETF network. Seeing as people aren't trusting the certificate, we don't think that 8.1x is really protecting us from that. If somebody stood up a fake IETF and provided a fake cert, people would just click through it anyway. We also had this idea that we could use 802.1x's ability to put people into different VLANs, sort of idea that you could join a single SSID, and instead of logging in as IETF, you could log in as, for example, NAT64 with the password of NAT64, and we'd put you a NAT64. We never did that. Seems like it's not a feature that we necessarily need. A couple of frequently asked questions. If we're just doing WPA2 and we use a single pre-shared key, probably IETF is like the pre-shared key, doesn't that mean anybody can just decrypt all the traffic? Nope. The pre-shared key is used to derive a pairwise transport key. So same like with Radius, you don't use that to encrypt, you just use it to derive a key. Also, why aren't we just going to do WPA3? It's the new hotness. Yes, it is the new hotness. Unfortunately, we tested this in the NOC, and we were dismayed to discover some of our devices don't actually do WPA3 yet. All of the APs and radios and stuff do, but some of our phones and laptops don't. So the actual plan is WPA3 with a fallback to WPA2. So if your device does WPA3, you'll use that. If it's not new enough, you won't. So basically, we think 802.1x is more faff than it's worth, and we'd like the community feedback. Not now, though, because of time. So we'll send out email to IETF announce and attendees, I think was the list we decided, and please provide feedback there. But basically, we think replacing .1x with WPA will make everyone's life better. And I did that in time.
Thanks, Warren. So I actually want to recommend we use admin discuss for this because it's IETF announced, nobody else can post to. I can, but nobody else can. And the attendees list also, not everybody might be on it because it's per meeting. So admin discuss would be my suggestion. I get 2 thumbs up from Warren, which doesn't happen very often. So excellent. Well, Right. This brings us to a slightly sadder part of the plenary because we've had some key IETF participants pass away recently. And we have two people who knew them well that are going to say a few words about them. I think, Barry, you're first.
So do we have slides for the two
You
people?
go next.
Oh, I go
slide,
next.
And there's a slide.
Oh, there it is. Hi, I'm Barry Leva, and I'm going to say a few words about John Leslie. John was a physicist by training, actually, back in the day when that's what you had to do to get a computer science degree, because there weren't computer science degrees. But he wound up being a programmer and got involved in the IETF and did work in various areas of the IETF. I knew him when both of us were volunteering to be scribes for the IESG before the Secretariat took over that function. And the minutes of the IESG meetings were just pretty, we talked about this and the document remains under consideration by the IESG. The scribes took down what the gist of the conversation was and provided a level of openness to the community of what happened in the IESG so that you could really see what conversations were going on and what we said about your documents and stuff. And that, John was very passionate about having that openness and making sure that the community knew what was going on. And he set up a whole bunch of templates and procedures for the scribes to use. And we had a great time scribing for this. And, it was an interesting experience. And John is not with us anymore, and I'm sad about that.
Thank you, Barry.
So this morning in BMWG, BMWG is the working group that I chaired with Al. I was there for 10 years with him. He chaired it for 10 years before me. As a product manager, we do speeds and feeds and data sheets. And so I gave a bit of a data sheet on Al and started off with his firsts, where his first published RFC was in 2002. That was 6 years before I came to the IETF. He had a 20-year career generating 42 RFCs and 56 drafts. And it's a wonderful thing to say, but I wanted to tell you a quick story about my first IETF. My very first meeting of that Monday was in a working group that will remain nameless. So in a room a little smaller than this, lots of mic lines, and it ended with two folks on either side of the room screaming at each other. And I thought, oh, well, okay. In my next meeting, I walked into BMWG for the first time, and there's Al sitting at the chair desk, smiling at us, all welcome, welcome. And then the meeting starts, and he kicks it off, and he says, welcome to BMWG, the kinder, gentler side of the IETF. And I felt like he was talking to my soul. Was he in the room with me that day? I don't know. Well, actually, I do know. I at the time, I thought, But since then, I've learned that every BMWG meeting we had, Al would introduce the working group with some variant of that story. And I think it's a very apropos telling of who the man was, right? He was incredibly smart. In researching the data sheet for Al this morning, I found, oh my goodness, he wrote the TWAM specification. I had no clue. He knew a lot of folks that I've worked with professionally. If you read here, this is an obituary that was provided by his wife. He had a twin brother, and I have to say I'm really sad that given some of the ADs that we've had over the years, Joel, Warren, particularly Warren, you just saw his update for the NOC. I'm really, really sad that I never got the chance to give up my chair just for a day, just for one meeting, and have all of the participants, including the ADs, walk in and see two Als. That would have been an epic troll. But what I've learned this week is that Scott Bradner joined us this morning. Joel said some words in as well. And Al was just a kind, A+ human being, super smart, very approachable, kind and gentle. I don't think those things just apply to the BMWG, which it does. By the way, come visit us. But it applied to Al. That's who he was. He was very intelligent and caring and giving to the folks around him and BMWG has a lot of newcomers and first timers like me as well when I was, and he made that first experience of writing my first draft and getting my first RFC in BMWG. He just made that a wonderful experience. So it's a sad day, but I hope when you leave, if you walk into another working group at a future IETF meeting, some working group chair there will say, hey, welcome to the kinder, gentler side of the IETF. You'll think of Al. Thank you.
Thanks. I'm going to ask for a moment of silence for the two deceased. Thank you. And with that, we are starting the open mics. First up is the ISG, if you would make your way up here. And those of you who have questions for the ISG can already sort of get in the queue. This is us. We are all here, modulo Francesca, who is still on maternity leave, and she keeps us updated with cute pictures occasionally that are very nice. And Zahed was here in the beginning of the week, but he had to travel back urgently to Sweden because of a family emergency, so he's not with us. And the queue is open. Introductions, yes, thank you, Miria. Let's start on the far end with Rob.
So Rob Wilton, and I'm the Ops Management AD.
John Scudder, Routing Area Director.
Roman Janilio, Security.
Jim Guichard, Routing AD. Paul Wouters, Security.
Eric Klein, Internet.
Warren Kamari, Ops AD.
Lars Eckert, IETF Chair, and Jen.
Eric Wink, Interi.
Andrew Alston, Routing Area Director.
Mia Kulevind, IAB Chair.
Murray Kucheravi, Art.
All right, but now the queues are open. This looks good.
Tough crowd, tough crowd.
Mr. Clenson is in the queue. Please go ahead, John. Do I need to do anything? Grant screen, maybe? No? Okay. I need to unmute him?
No.
No, he needs to unmute himself. Okay. So I don't do any of this normally. So completely clueless when it comes to Milaco. So John, I hear there might be something you need to do at your end. Are you there?
Yeah. New
Okay,
version
great.
of the informed log buttons. You mentioned the appeal that you're processing. I raised an issue on the list that there's some other issues which were not raised in the appeal, but apply to the same document set. Are you going to look at those, or do we wait until you process the current appeal and then generate a separate appeal about those issues?
So the appeal was about the ISG statement on interim and in-person meetings. So they were not on a document set. So you're referring to your email on the NFSv4 documents, or?
No, I'm referring to my email on the guidance and interim meetings.
Okay. So I was under the impression that Zahed had talked to you on the phone a few days ago, and when I talked to him, he.
Sorry, we're getting confused. He did. He had a very good conversation. I think that's under control, at least as soon as he finishes with his family emergency. But after you posted a note about this specific appeal on the guidance document, guidelines document, I posted a note which indicated that there were some other issues which the original appeal did not mention, and suggested that when you look at the appeal that you got in front of you. And as you mentioned earlier, that you look at those additional issues also, so we didn't end up having to generate a separate appeal on the additional issues. And I'm wondering where that's.
Got you. So there was probably a miscommunication because I was under the impression Zahed had discussed that one with you as well, and I guess he didn't. So I have not prepared anything yet because that came in rather late while we were all in the preparation of the meeting. If I remember correctly, and maybe somebody else can correct me on this, you were raising a question: what kind of approval in a virtual interim meeting is seeing by the IESG or the responsible area director? And then there was a second question on both in-person and hybrid meetings that I can't recall. But it's the first one, correct? So as far as I know, and again, people need to correct me on this because Jen doesn't really get interim requests. During COVID, when we were fully remote, the IESG at the time delegated the approval of fully online interim meetings to the Secretariat because there was just a flood of them and it was clear that they needed approval. And that seems to have worked well because we never had any complaints about them, and that is still the process that is being used today because the IESG, believe it or not, occasionally does try to delegate responsibilities. On the second part, can you remind me what the question in the email was? I'm sorry.
Let's save time. If you don't remember, let me drop you in the IESG another note, and we can deal with it on list or whatever it takes. I just don't want this to get lost, and I don't want to accidentally back ourselves into a corner where another appeal is needed about the same sets of policies right after you finish processing an appeal.
Okay, thank you, John. I'm sorry there was a miscommunication. I have Robert who might have a tools correction on this, or why are you in the queue because you're in the queue and I can't just, oh, you're in the queue?
No,
because...
I'm in the queue.
Okay, got it, sorry. All right, thank you, John. We'll get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. I have Alan next.
Yes, this is Alan. This is just a quick comment on Warren's comment.
Can you get close to the mic? It's hard to hear.
It's short. Yeah. This is just a quick comment on Warren's comments earlier about WPA2 and WPA3. Yes. The issue with 802.1x is the technologies are okay. The user interfaces are not handled by the IETF, and they're somewhat worse. So it's fine. It's a good idea. I couldn't get on earlier, so.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, so I +1 on moving to WPA. Tim.
Hi there, Tim Chang. I notice we have now sponsors for diversity inclusion. As a 50-something-year-old white bloke, I'm looking at a row of 50-something-year-old white blokes largely. What are we doing about diversity inclusion with the people that are sat either side of you?
So I would hold that for the LLC, which oversees this. I would point out that none of that money actually goes to leadership. Right? This is all going to programs such as the childcare and various other mechanisms that let people attend, like fee waivers and so on.
Okay. The question still stands.
The question is
regardless of sponsors, what are we doing about it?
Well, apparently it's also a question for the NomCom, but I mean, let me sort of, I used to be a NomCom a while ago, right? And the NomCom is obviously limited by the candidates that accept nominations for certain roles, right? The NomCom can't pick people that didn't volunteer. And so Martin already said earlier, right, that he hopes that lots of people get nominated, and he also hopes that lots of people then accept that nomination. And if you want to see diversity, that's where it will need to come from, because the IESG and the IB and various other leadership models have very little ability to appoint people ourselves, right? So it's really the community that needs to make sure that it reflects the diversity it wants to see in leadership by nominating people and convincing them and their employers that it's worthwhile. Any more, Andrew?
Yeah, so I think this is actually a really important point. A lot of it comes down to where can we get people who actually want to stand up and run. For myself, I speak as the first African resident to actually sit on the IESG. And a lot of that I found came from the fact that the NomCom was actually asking a lot of diversity questions. And we are out there, I know for myself, out there trying to bring people from, you know, my continent here, try and increase the diversity because, as you say, I'm, you know, in Africa, we would refer to me as a pale male. I would like to see more inclusion, and it is being worked on, but it's about getting the candidates to actually be willing to accept the nominations, to come in here and stand up. And that is partly about education, to go out there and say, this is the IETF, come and participate. And it is something that I think that I know from myself and other people here, we are actively trying to encourage people to come and put their names forward and stand up and join the team.
Rob and then Roman.
So I agree that actually one of the key issues here is trying to get more diversity into the organization in terms of people who are participating, because that's where everyone gets pulled into. The one action, or one of the actions I think that ADs can take and working group chairs can take, is to try and help promote more diversity through the position. So that might be like a working group secretary position, or if you're choosing like a new working group chair, you have that choice of who you're choosing between, and you may choose to put forward a candidate that you think that might sort of increase the diversity. So there's that sort of option and choice that I've chosen to exercise and things at least one occasion, because I think that helps. And I think that's the way it has to change, but it still doesn't fundamentally change the aspect. We need to get more diversity of people coming into the organization, which really requires the outreach to companies and other organizations to sort of encourage them to get more diverse in terms of who they send.
I wanted to build on what Rob said. Certainly there's the considerations from the NomCom, but as ADs, one of the biggest levers we have is thinking about how does one get from being a participant in the community to being an AD. And one of those key things is providing other leadership opportunities, the biggest of which is working group chairs. I think almost everyone here sitting at the table was prior a working group chair. And I know I and my fellow ISG ADs consider that in the selection of those working group chairs, to give folks that haven't prior had those opportunities and bring them into that leadership fold, because that's one of the key stepping stones to ultimately end up on this board or kind of any of the others here in IETF leadership.
Last. Okay.
So yeah, following on from what Rob and Roman said.
You can get close to the mic, I think.
Yeah. So yeah, looking up here, you know, there's a bunch of old white guys, but from up here, looking at the audience, there's a large bunch of sort of old white guys as well. What might be really helpful is speak to your colleagues and try and convince more people to come along and participate, so that, you know, our entire community is less made up of old white guys. That would be really helpful.
Yeah, in the same vein, the important part is really to increase diversity of this whole community, and that's something that the IAB and the ISG has discussed a lot. But I also have to say, just throwing money at the problem doesn't only help it, right? As Warren just said, we get these diversity money from companies, but then the companies are just sending us the same people. So, and we depend on who's sent here. So you all can do a lot there. But then at the same time, also, if you have ideas about additional things we can do, please let us know, because that's really something that we've been discussing very intensively lately.
Harold and Robert have been in the queue for a while, but some other people joined. I want to ask if anybody else is in the queue that wants to talk about diversity. So Michael, Andrew, or Leslie?
Leslie, yes.
Leslie wants to. Okay, Leslie, please go ahead so that we don't have to skip around topics, if you don't mind.
Sure, thanks. Leslie Daigle. I think maybe Tim didn't ask the question quite right, because I don't think it was a question of why are you all up there at the table. I think everybody's doing a fine job. However, I think the question is, why does that table ultimately not look like this audience does? There are more women and other underrepresented people in this audience than there are at that table. So the question about programs may be more about, how do you make sure that people who are here are given the same opportunities as everybody who is up there has had? And I'm not saying I'm looking for opportunities. I've had plenty, thanks. But so it is possible, but maybe you need to focus a little harder on making sure that that you're not just stopping at throwing money at the problem, as Miria said, and focus on making sure everybody gets the opportunities.
Fair point. One suggestion off the top of my head would be to see if we can have a, I don't want to call it a BOF, but at least sort of community meeting on this where we could discuss this a little bit longer than we have at the plenary. Robert, do you want to go next? Or Andrew, were you also in the topic, or okay? All right, I'm going to take Andrew and then we're going to go back to the queue.
Yes, just a couple of things. There's a comment, I think Karen made it in the chat, that we get a lot of people coming to a meeting once and they're never seen again. And also the point I was going to make anyway is Corinne Cathspeth, her PhD thesis was on the culture largely of the IETF. It makes some of it's uncomfortable reading, but I would urge, if you've not read it, please read it. There's a lot of good points and learnings in there. I think there's a lot of resistance in the community to the points that are made. But if you want to change and improve the diversity, then you have to change the culture, and which is always difficult, but that's fundamentally the problem. And as I say, the measure of why that's a problem is the sheer turnover of people that come once and then are so put off by the culture that they literally never come again. So we have a lot of clues as to what the answers are. It's whether there's an appetite to do something about it in reality.
So thank you for bringing this up. This is a really important point. But changing the culture is like very, very hard and definitely not something that will happen very fast, right? Something we're trying and you all need to support that. And I just want to say, I read these reports and they don't offer any kind of advice or whatever, right? So it's like, it's a hard problem. If you have any advice how to improve, I'm very open to that. I think we have made improvement. That's also something that's not acknowledged in these reports. And the other thing I would like to ask people is to also kind of promote the IETF and the community, because what I also see in these reports is kind of rather giving advice to not contribute because the barriers are too high. And that is kind of a little bit counterproductive. So we're really, really trying here, and we all need to work together in order to make it work.
Because I'm bad at running queues. It's actually Harold that is next, and then not Robert. So Harold, go ahead.
Thank you.
Sorry, sorry, not no.
Thank you. Completely different subject. I was in Gen Dispatch earlier this week, listening to people explaining that they had a problem with the IESG's ability to manage its document queue. I had a real problem. I had to check that they were not reading aloud from RFC 3744, published in 2004. The IESG's working methods have been constant for more than 20 years, and this wheel has been squeaking for more than 20 years. Can we ask you, Lars, as the top responsible person for this organization's working methods, to take a good look and see that we can do something about it so it doesn't squeak for another 20?
You can ask. And I'm going to put it on my long list of things that are already on the plate for the IETF chair. This is one of my pet peeves, right? That there's a ton of RFCs that basically task me or my role with a lot, right? This one I would actually argue is the responsibility of the entire ISG. I think 2026 doesn't specifically say that the chair needs to do it. However, I'm obviously leading the ISG. There were a bunch of air directors in the Gen Dispatch meeting, right? And we followed the discussion with interest. And I think there were some good points that were made. Like the community, I think, needs to come to some consensus on what it thinks the priorities are for the ISG, because I don't think we have clarity on that. And the ISG going ahead and trying to change things about the way we process the documents may not actually then lead to a successful improvement. The other thing I will sort of say is that there was a lot of focus on the document queue because that is what everybody understands and it's very visible in the data tracker. For most ADs and specifically for the IETF chair, you have a document queue on one side that you need to manage, and we have a process that is old and I would say established, and everybody kind of understands it. And then you have a game of whack-a-mole on the other side, and that one is completely unpredictable and interrupts everything, and you need to keep both of those things in sync. And so it's not only the documents that are causing load on the ISG, it is random other events that somehow end up on the ISG's plate. But I will take an action item to see if we can have a community discussion, probably in a room at the next IETF about this.
Thank you. The problem statements in that RFC are also spread out over a number of ISG issues. The main point is actually that we have had a lot of working group of IETF chairs who have not managed to change fundamentally how the ISG operates. And I think it may be time to abandon the status quo.
Thanks for your vote of confidence here. So it is a very hard problem, right? It is because the ISG is clocked by the queue, and there was a discussion whether we could run experiments, right? And I think we're actually willing to consider that, right? But they need to be well defined with metrics and data backed and so on. But also the community needs to understand that while we run experiments, things are going to be slower, right? Because they're not going to be faster. Do you have any reactions to Harold from the rest of the ISG? Otherwise, I can also move along, John.
Yeah, I have one reaction, which is, so I was at Gen Dispatch also, and so I agree with you, Harold, that there's a wheel and it's been squeaking for 20 years or more. The other thing that I heard at Gen Dispatch, and I'll speak under correction, but was that it was a bit like the parable of the blind people and the elephant and all that, right? Where different people have had their own ideas about what was causing the squeak. So until we have some kind of clarity on, and I think that one of the more productive suggestions was let's focus on that first. Until the community has some clarity on what exactly should be fixed, we're going to have a harder time coming up with a fix. So that's my reaction.
Robert.
Yeah, I'm going to pick very gently on your queue management because you correctly recognized when I got up that I was adding to the conversation that John had started. You misspoke slightly, but in an important way. You chose to delegate approval of interims to the chairs. You gated announcement of the interims to the Secretariat, who are also tasked to make sure that the chairs were reasonably within the bounds of guidance that you gave them when they should approve these things. I think that was the right thing to do. As you're going through the appeals resolution process and choosing to do whatever you're going to do with updating the guidance, please maintain that. This takes workload off of the IESG, puts the responsibility in the right hands. The ADs still have the responsibility to steer if the chairs are not doing the right thing. It's been working. Don't change that.
Thanks, Robert, and thanks for the clarification. I think we had Leslie already, so Tara is next.
Thank you. I'm going to bring it back to the topic of the diversity. Yeah, I mean, I do hear, like, for me, like, it's really frustrating when someone brings up a question about funding and the answer is we should do more outreach. I don't think it's a marketing issue. Like, the IETF's like value proposition, why people should participate in it is clear. On the other hand, yeah, culture issue is real, and I'm sure that like an organization that has so much experience coming up with processes and coming up with solutions can come up with a process that looks at culture and come up with solutions. Like, I don't think it's an insurmountable problem for all the smart people here. But yeah, I want to bring it back to the funding. My comment on the fact that throwing money at the problem won't solve it is don't knock it till you try it. We have not been anywhere close to throwing enough money at the problem of diversity and inclusion. So my suggestion is, like, please take the original consideration seriously. Try to invest way more resources, because I think there's a structural problem where participating in IETF is not easy and it's not cheap. And certain people have more access to resources and certainly have more ability to participate in such a process. And until either that process changes well enough that it provides an equal access, like, ground to everyone, there's an imbalance in resources, and that imbalance in resources should be taken seriously and addressed with enough support for folks who might not have that kind of access. And thank you.
No, thank you for that point. And I'm sorry if I said something that you interpreted as we shouldn't, spend more money and
yeah.
DNI.
Also, I was just saying that in general. Like, I'm not, like, I wasn't targeting anyone with my comment. Just, I think, it's just, I don't think, I mean, looking at, I'm also like, I only come to a very few IETFs every once in a while, so I might not have the full picture. So I apologize if I'm missing something, but I don't think there's been enough spending on diversity inclusion compared to other
You're correct.
aspects.
It's a reasonably new sort of category of sponsorship money that we're getting, and we're actively actually looking for suggestions, what else we could do. I think the childcare, I don't remember. I think it might have come as a suggestion from the community. And we, established it, we tried it out, it worked well, and we're going to fund it in perpetuity. If there's other things that we can consider spending money on, we're in a good situation where actually we have supporters that see the value in DNI. And so if we can outline a program for them, we're usually able to attract some funding to run it. But we were actually very happy to hear if those of you who go to other events and see something that works there, let us know. And make suggestions, and we can see if we can come up with something else that we can try.
No, it's just more funding, and hopefully also take that cultural issue seriously. I think it's something that can change. Other organizations, other bodies have been able to manage culture and look at it, but it takes you need to have a process. You need to have, like, uncomfortable conversations. You need to have to take a internalized look at what happens within like the different working groups and different modes of operation. Like, it's not a problem that's impossible to solve. Like, the body of knowledge exists out there, and I think it's something that IETF can figure out. It's not, but it should be taken seriously and put into operation.
Thank you. I think Eric, you had a reaction.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously agree with you on this one, but sometimes money can help. For instance, for two IETF meetings now, we have the closed caption. And as a non-English speaker, sometimes when I'm hearing somebody which is also not English speaker, I am looking at those, it helps. That's just one minor thing, but it helps.
Because I was saying just throwing money at the problem is not enough, right? So more money can help, but at the moment we have actually a budget here and we need more ideas what we can do. And just a very quick comment on the culture. I think there has been a little bit of improvement lately. The one specific challenge we have in this organization is that we are an open organization. We don't have membership or whatever, which makes things slightly more complicated than for other organizations. And again, this is a challenge where we need input and ideas.
Yeah, I also just
go ahead.
Wanted to make one other comment about, the money issue. If you spend the money, for example, flying 50 people here, that can help bring people in, then we've got to find a way to keep them coming back. And that, yes, speaks to culture, it speaks to education, it speaks to a lot of things. And I think that more ideas about retention of new people would also be, very welcome, because that is something that I've noticed, that a number of people come and they show up here, they're here for a meeting or two meetings, and then they don't come back. And ways to increase that retention of people on the newcomer side, I think would be a really good thing. And I would love to hear ideas from the community about how we can get better at retaining the newcomers.
Thank you. I'm going to close the queue after Arnaud because we're running quite a bit late, but Q, please go ahead.
Q myself. So I have a few things to say on this. I forget what their name was. I'm so sorry. It was just speaking comment about spending more money. Not there was 9, what was it? 18 fee waivers were given out. I don't think that's necessarily enough compared to how many people are present here. I'm not sure what the financial situation is, but I think that the more could be done to help people who don't have the money come here. Not necessarily to every meeting, just like if we can make it so someone can come once a year, that's still a massive improvement, not 3 times a year. I know that can get expensive. I would also suggest more outreach with universities, because I'm looking around the room and this is quite an old audience generally. So if we could get some more university students in, that would be great. And you know, fresh ideas, new people, always nice. And on the topic of retaining people, I think more could be done on, I'm not sure what could be done, but more could be done on the guides system, which I used in Yokohama, which was my first meeting, and I generally found it a bit inadequate. I was just being told what was already on the IETF website, more hand-holding through the meeting, because it's such a massive organization that it's like you can read all the RFCs about how it operates, but it still doesn't make sense. So a bit more hand-holding through a first meeting would probably help.
Thank you. Wes, I guess I skipped you. I'm sorry, or the queue's jumping, and I'm.
Don't worry about it, because I'm actually going to follow that up. So thank you. That was actually, I came up here to talk about 2 things, one of which was the guides program. I want to thank all the guides that have participated in the past, because that is how we get new people in and make them comfortable. We have talked a lot about how do we improve it? How do we do? One thing that we recognized a number of years ago is that we can't handhold people completely through the meeting, because there's people that need to do their own work. So we have to find the right balance there. But I do think that we're missing sort of the long-term, how do we get from somebody coming new into the door trained up to a leadership position? And the IESG and the IAB have had conversations in the past about how do we build that pipeline? How do we get that queue? And the guides program is sort of the start of that. To everybody else, it's, you know, be open, welcoming, approachable, and all the types of things that require people to stick around. And then finally, speaking of the age of a lot of the people in this room, I suspect that means that many of us are managers. If you're upwards in your company, you probably have somebody working for you. I know I try to get diverse students, you know, working with me, for example. If you're a manager, you can probably fund people to get here or talk to your organization to make it happen. And that's, you know, you're the ones that are going to be responsible, because as Lars stated much earlier in the day, you can only accept the nominations from the people that you get. So the managers in this room are the ones that will enable people to actually be nominatable, if that makes any sense.
Thanks, Wes. Tim.
Hi, yes, so Tim Jones, so thank you. I think a lot of the comments that have been made here have been really good. I think there are some sort of fundamental questions that also need to be asked, like who in the IETF is responsible in some way for diversity inclusion? Who could people go to and have a confidential discussion about it, for example? What are we doing to measure and monitor it and report it? Those are the sort of, you know, if you're going to fix something, you need to be able to measure and monitor it. Those are sort of some of the basic questions we need to make sure we've got clear. And I agree with the point that maybe we need some way of being able to discuss it more. There's a lot of ideas are needed. I do agree that there are things that could be funded, sort of independent, what's the word? People speaking independently to some of the attendees that come to find out what their views are, and to be able to summary report those and to find out. You know, Warren says, you know, he looks out into the audience and he sees a lot of people, white 50-year-old people like me, but there are, you know, I've seen around the halls today, there is an awful lot of, for example, attendees from Asia, and I don't see many Asian people up there. Maybe they don't come to the plenary for another reason so much as we do. for example. So there's it's a very easy question to ask, and it's a very complicated thing to fix. But I think there are some fundamental things like taking responsibility for it, having a person who's at least one person or maybe more whose responsibility it is, and getting the measurement, monitoring, and reporting in place.
Yep. Thanks for that. So I will point out that the LLC, or specifically the surveys that the LLC is doing, is tracking diversity now. It has been tracking it for a number of times, and there's actually questions that are specifically about, why do or don't you participate, and what are the problems we have. And one data point that I remember, because it's very sad, is that the tech industry, I think, has a 20% ratio of females, and we have under 10. So we are like twice as bad as the tech industry, which is already terrible, which is a depressing metric. Tobias. So we got to move on a little bit because we're running kind of late. But.
Yeah, so Tobias Hiebich, Max Planck Institute for Informatics. I think one point about diversity is what Baron is doing. Like, somebody has to wear a hat and be in charge of that. So I do have some thoughts on people that could be approached, who I don't want to publicly throw under the bus here. So if there's somebody who can push about like how we could get somebody in charge of that. And the second thing is just starting to do something. So a first step would maybe be a birds of a feather session, or like after this meeting, squatting a room and talking.
Last thing. So, I mean, diversity and outreach is many aspects, as we discussed already, right? Including chairs training, leadership training, new participants, and whatever. And we have activity for that, and that's all put together under the EODIR, and they have a meeting, so you can go there. So that's like a good discussion point. Then there's also part of the responsibilities for the IAB. We are usually have a lot of outward-facing activities where we talk to other organizations or go out into other meetings. So we actually try to coordinate this a little better and create actually a position to have an outreach coordinator. So that is hopefully the touch points if you want to get engaged in that EODIR, IAB. But in generally, I also want to just encourage you to like contact the leadership, the IESG or the IAB anytime. Just send us an email. I mean, like, we get a lot of emails, but we don't get a lot of emails from the community about these kind of things. So we will take them seriously.
Thank you. Eric, I had closed the queue before you. I'm sorry, but
it was there way before you closed the queue.
Okay, so maybe there were some Wi-Fi issues. Okay, so I'm going to take Arnaud first, and I'm going to take Eric as the last one to the IESG. Arnaud, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. So Arnaud Tadei, Symantec by Broadcom. It's more to share perhaps perspectives, to perhaps give suggestions. So I think the problem that we have here is not specific to IETF. We see that in other SDOs. I'm in the ITU. We have same issues, diversity, the old white men that are in the rooms, and so on, same issues. But I would like to rebound on VES, because VES made a very good point. The issue is that it's not only to get people here first, and that's hard. And the issue actually has to deal with their managers in their companies. Because when we studied the problem, and it went through 2 resolutions that failed, to an action plan that we managed to establish, we realized the stupid problem we have was a question that came from a former EU commissioner who said, have we checked if in education on leadership trainings, is standardization still explained? And the answer seems to be no. So there is a large part of the world where when engineers come, and it's beyond diversity, when engineers come and try to come, they have to convince their managers who have no idea what standardization means. Large areas on the industry, when you ask the question, what is IETF? They are clueless. Perhaps ISO is good because ISO has its name in their standards, so they did good marketing, but for what we are doing is strange, but that is what we observe. So we have a bigger problem because to get them to agree for their engineers to come here and to sustain this is very hard today to convince them what the ROI and so on.
Understood. Do you have a suggestion for us or have you an example of what worked for those organizations?
No, suggestions would be perhaps you could compare notes between, say, IETF, ITU, and so on, because we have maybe things we could bring. We have an action plan we could share. We could show what we are trying to do, and maybe you could join forces on some of the areas there.
Thank you. Eric. The mic's not working, Keep speaking. I guess you need to turn it up.
Is this working now?
Yep.
Yay. I'm wondering if we looked at collecting metrics on why we have one-time attendees, because this is something I've noticed as well. And I agree with Andrew that I think there's an important part of not just getting people to show up, but getting people to show up and keep showing up. And we've been actively trying to increase the diversity of our attendance, which is also mostly a bunch of middle-aged white guys. And one of the things that we run into is that oftentimes we'll have people who will come once and then will not come back again. And like I have anecdotal data as to why, but it's something where those anecdotes don't necessarily provide as much information. Whereas if we started looking at collecting that every single IETF and look at who came and then didn't come again the next time, that might start giving us some concrete data to start looking at what parts of the culture we might need to fix, or are there things around travel budget that we need to fix, or are there things around training or other things that could help with people feel more comfortable when they come here the first time to keep coming back. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for that. I'm going to put a pin in this because I think this is now entering LLC territory, and Jay has been running surveys and might actually have data on this. And I think you're on the stage with us later on. Excellent. So then maybe we can sort of take a response to Eric then from the LLC, because I think this is now straight beyond the IESG. Thank you all. Thank you, IESG. Next up is the IAB. So Miriam can stay. Rest of the IAB, please come up to the stage. And we might run a couple minutes over depending on how busy the mic lines get. So I'm sorry.
Hello again. Just start comment. Introduction.
Colin Jennings, board enthusiast.
Chris Wood, IAB. Tommy Polly, IAB.
Drew Doody, IAB.
Alvaro Retana, IAB.
Ching Wu, IAB.
Colin Perkins, IRTF chair.
Wes Herdeker, IAB.
Mia Kühlewin, IB chair.
Lars Eckert, IAB.
But ISG. But you, whatever.
Mallory No. Mallory No, IAB.
Jian Kang Yao, IAB.
Suresh Krishnan, IAB.
Okay, mic line is open. It's great. All the questions went to the ISG. No problem.
Works for us.
No? 5 more seconds. Okay. Next, the LSE.
So Amy and Cindy, I want the middle slot next time for the ISG again. That works way better for us than the first one. Miriam. I thought for a second we were going for maximum spread here, but I guess not.
Sure. Sean Turner.
Lars Eckert.
Miriam Kühne. Yeah. Okay.
Jay Daly. Shall I kick off Sean with this? Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I'm just
Jason
gonna,
Livingood, remote. There's not a video showing of who's on the stage, by the way.
Okay, Jason, I'm just going to kick off a little bit with our
Of course, yeah.
a brief thing about diversity and inclusion from the LLC perspective. Yep. So first of all, the things that we use the money on are fee waivers. So we have 270 people roughly are coming off the diversity inclusion budget this time. Support for the sisters group and childcare. And some of the grants money that goes towards the ANRW and other things. So from the LLC perspective, there are 4 things that we can do to support the community and support the IETF here. The first one is measure, second is analyze, the third is create the right conditions, and the fourth is provide support. All of those are things that we're doing at the same time. They're not sequential. So we've been doing a lot of measurement about what about the diversity of the community, about barriers to participation, and trying to get data about that as much as possible. So that's the all of IETF community survey that we do. We've done twice now. We sent it out to 50,000 people, had 2,000 responses each time, and we have some good data from that. And that's where we get the figures that Lars was able to quote earlier. So we're able to scope the problem. That's part of it. The next thing is analysing it. So this meeting, we actually have somebody walking around who's doing a series of interviews with women about their experiences in the IETF, so that we can understand more about that and understand why people come, what they don't come, what those things are. The next thing is about creating the conditions for people to be able to come. And that's something that's taking place across the organisation. But you will notice that the organisation is getting more welcoming, is getting better. So there are some of that is about the just the action that the IESG and others are taking about some of behaviour and things, and some of it is about the fact that many people here are recognising they have a personal responsibility, and they are bringing that personal responsibility to the table all the time. And then the final thing is the support. So that is support in multiple ways. We've had a major review of the newcomers program and are now doing that very differently. And that is now producing great results. People are liking it. They're coming back again. We have also put considerable work into the documentation and the other things that people are getting, which has got more to go. And then, I mean, well, there are multiple other bits, but that support is being worked on. So we've still got a long way to go. But we do actually at least have a plan and for tackling this that goes across the organisation. So it's an absolute high priority. We all know that. We all understand that. It's something that is being worked on. So that's just quickly it from the LLC perspective, and then I'll hand back.
All right, I'll run the queue. Anthony.
Anthony Somerset. I saved this for the LLC because it's LLC, and I'm hoping that I sit on the right side of old. I was obviously brought by, not quite my manager, but by a work colleague. I will say it is quite hard to keep coming. It's a lot of effort, but pushing through and enjoying it. My question being the honorary 10-year African in the room coming up from South Africa every time. This is long haul every single IETF. So sticking my kind of stake in the ground, have we considered as the IETF an African meeting, even if it's not part of the main rotation?
So we are relatively constrained by RFC 8719 about that. It needs somebody from the community to recommend that to the IETF mailing list. It needs then a process to be followed to see if there's community consensus about that, which Lars judges, and then we can start work on that. So I personally would like to see that change to a very different process, but I can talk to you certainly about initiating that process.
Yeah, I was going to ask.
It picks it back
I think
up.
it's actually gone. Batteries. Just tell me which list, and I can start the process. No problem.
Yeah, I'll talk to you later on. Explain it.
Leslie.
Thank you, Leslie Daigle, and this is for Jay. I would like to give you an opportunity, Jay. In your slides earlier, you were talking about, you had a chart of upcoming meetings with hosts listed, and there were about 8 blanks. You said a couple were under discussion and there's room for improvement. That sounds kind of like there's a lot of room for hosting opportunities. So I'd really like you to drive the point home to say that we really need hosts to step up for our upcoming meetings, and maybe give some indication of what will happen in our budget if we don't get hosts for those meetings.
Well, I mean, I know I could start like the great social that everyone loved won't happen,
right? Lots of other things of that effect happen, and it hurts where you want to go, right? So at the end of the day, if somebody wants to go to Africa, right, somebody's going to have to help probably write a check for that. So you can add more if you like.
Yes, please do step up. Please do help support us. Each of the meetings normally, the host fee is $390,000. It's a lot of money, but it's a fraction of the cost of the meeting. And without it, we can support a number of meetings without it, but it gets more and more difficult. And as Sean says, there are fewer things that we can do. We understand that the industry is going through a bit of a difficult patch, but we think the IETF is still exceptionally valuable. As somebody has pointed out, if the IETF goes, you can't recreate it. It simply wouldn't work again the next time round. So please, yes, do support it.
John Levine.
You get John Levine. I have sort of a boring question, which is, I noticed on the financial summary that the expenses are $300,000 below estimate, which seems like, I understand why the revenue would be off, but I'm kind of wondering where the $300,000 went.
Sorry, it is below. Yes, I'm not entirely sure of the reasons.
We'll take that back and get back to you.
It's just, yeah. I mean, I'll help you look under the sofa if that would help.
All right. Yeah. Saving money. We're doing good things. Mr. Nottingham.
I think the phrase you're looking for is we'll take that on notice. Yeah. Mark Nottingham. When you're talking about diversity, especially in leadership, I would very much encourage you to think big and to think long term. For example, I would love it if in 5 years we had a non-trivial number of people up on the stage who were supported in their work to make sure that we had a diverse set of people there in many different axes. And by supported, I don't just mean, comping meeting fees and travel. I mean significant support. So please think big.
Yang Yao? Oh, sorry.
Hello. So when I first come IETF, I think is 2005. The registration fee is around $500 US. Now the registration fee is $1,000 US. So in future maybe $2,000 US. So I think this model may be not sustainable. So I think IETF LLC maybe need another business opportunity. So because now ICANN has the new GTLD program, so maybe next 2 years or 1 year, so they will open. So maybe IETF LLC can apply, for example, .IETF, .rfc, .internet, .draft. So use domain name registration fee, so we can increase the revenue of IETF. So we don't need increase the registration fee every year. So maybe we should set the bar to the IETF registration fee, because we have, if the registration fee is too high, so we will limit the number of attendants. Maybe only the big company can send the people to here, but some self-employed people or small company cannot send the people to IETF. So that's my suggestion. So apply the new TLD from ICANN. So
I'll get another TLD.
Yeah, another TLD.
Oh, maybe one. I don't know, but we're definitely looking at we're looking at all kinds of fundraising. We have somebody whose job is to do that. Lee Berkeley Shaw over there. We're looking at large organizations that have the ability to throw off large chunks of change. And my goal is to get like $100 million in the bank. So a lot of stuff is free and we don't have to ask for money. Unfortunately, the part about the registration fees going up from $500 to $1,000 since 2005, we did a consultation like just a couple of meetings ago to actually address that. And unfortunately, there's this thing called inflation. It does go up. So you're right. Until we get the revenue streams somehow different and in a different way, it's going to keep going up. That's just unfortunately how it's going to go, because their money does not grow on trees. So, but again, I appreciate. I think you're looking. We're looking. If you got ideas, talk. Somebody you can write a check. Talk to Lee Berkeley. She's more than willing to take your money. Well, I mean, there are obviously strings. We don't just take it from anybody, but
So one last sentence, because Jay has, I think he has some registration operation experience. So I've been member worse also. I can board a member. So if we apply a new TLD for IETF, so we have opportunity. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Abdul Salam.
Yes, I appreciate the work you're doing. Usually, as Jay said, the survey and analysis is very important. I will ask, have you done some survey with the management, or have some questions and answers to analyze what the management think regarding the process, or what are the challenges, and if they got to their goals or not? Usually in administration or in job processes, as you see it as not a technology point of view, but it's as administrating. Is there quality in the achieving the tasks of the organization? I think this is the job of LCC. Maybe you should tell me if I'm wrong or not. And also, usually engineers, they are not good, or technical engineers are not good in management. So it's good to have some kind of auditing, another party as you, LLC. You tell me if I didn't achieve what I should have done. Usually in the working group level, let's say if there's a mistake happened and I couldn't get my voice out and I talk to while I'm in my meeting, I have to do an appeal. I appeal against the chair of the working group. Maybe I'm more smart enough to not even like to do an appeal. So usually smart people, they just leave. They will not do an appeal. The system, or the working system in IETF, you have to do an appeal. Maybe people don't like to do that. And with the higher level of administration, let's say the IESG, is there some kind of auditing? Are they doing, because usually they are busy now. This is a volunteering job. So if they are they have a lot of work, we increase the number of ADs for per areas. That's good. But is there some kind of auditing? Are you auditing as LLC? Are you auditing this kind of targeting or achieving the milestones for the ADs and the working group chair? Thank you.
Thank you for that. So I replaced Sean because this is sort of straying a little bit into the standards process. So there's a pretty hard firewall between the LLC, who administers the operations of the IETF, and the IESG, who oversees the standards process. And so no, the LLC does not is not involved in any appeals or any technical work. If you did try and raise an issue with the working group chair and you were brushed off, I'm very sorry. Please raise it with the responsible area director, and I can guarantee you when it reaches that level, it will not be brushed off. It will be taken seriously, because an appeal is actually a formal action that the ISG takes very seriously, and we will respond to that. Mike.
Mike Ounsworth. So this question is both sort of general access to meetings, barriers to attending and keeping people returning, as well as the specific EDI slant to that. Can you share how going from fully virtual back to physical has affected, access and inclusion?
Well, I personally think it's gotten better because there's more people that can come remote. And some of the hurdles that we had initially, like how are we going to do a hum, like we kind of have a tool now that like helps us with those things. Some people love it, some people hate it, but I think it does help. Do I personally think that the meetings will go fully virtual and then everybody will you know, always be remote? I think no, because I think some of the actual value of the meeting is the actual in-hallway and personal conversations that you get to knock out a long technical topic in 20 minutes that you can't really do over via email. But that's my personal opinion. So,
But that does bias the people who can afford both in money and in time and in support of employers to be here.
So we have significantly improved the process for remote participants, and part of that has meant sharing the pain, so that on-site participants have had to change a number of their practices. Hums are far rarer now. The hand-raising tool is used. Local participants need to use Meet Echo in order to be able to join the queue, so that it's a unified queue. So that has made a substantial benefit, I think, for remote participants. The area where we really haven't been able to provide anything like the same level experience is the social side of things, you know, the hallway and people getting to meet each other. That's something we would like to tackle, but it seems to be a general problem with this kind of meeting across the world. So we've tried a number of experiments. They haven't worked that well, and we will continue to experiment.
Tara.
Thank you. I would like to just, yeah, it was great to hear about like what the diversity inclusion money is being spent on, and ideally, like, hopefully, like that would continue across the upcoming years. And but just to clarify my earlier comment, I think what didn't come across is I'm talking that the scale of the challenge that's facing the IETF will needs a magnitude of order more investment in diversity and inclusion. And yeah, harkening back to Mark's words and also like what the questions are being asked in the chat, like what is significant support? Like I think instead of thinking about like fee waivers for a meeting, it's more a fellowship for a year or more, like something like that on that order. I'm not saying that that's the only way, but I'm just saying that like we're talking about investments that are much more significant and support people for a longer time to be able to for them to retain, because if you pay someone to attend for one meeting and then they come back the next meeting, you can't wonder why they didn't come back. Like it's the situation has not been changed by one meeting. And yeah,
if the average time to get an RFC out the door is 3 years, your point is you paid me to come to one meeting and I got to go to, you know, like, you know, 8 more. Like, how am I going to get here? Yeah. But again, like, I mean, our aspirational goal is big bucket of money that gets used for lots of stuff. So unfortunately, the way that's got to happen is people got to give us the money, right?
But one thing we did discuss, so the Internet Society used to run a technical fellows program, which is kind of what you described, right? They brought people in for I think a series of meetings, and that achieved part of that goal. They decided to stop that for various reasons that are theirs, but we actually discussed on the LLC board and with the IESG whether the LLC can spin something up for that purpose. It would require like an order of magnitude more money because it's a significant investment, and we would also need to come up with some community involvement process for sort of selecting those fellows, right? But it is something we have discussed, and if this is something we should flesh out a bit more, especially if there's companies that would be interested in supporting that kind of outreach or whatever you want to call it, I think that would be useful.
Exactly, and I think like I'm not saying it's an easy problem to solve. I'm not saying like, oh, we should just raise this budget by this much and just move that lever. I recognize that it's a hard problem to solve, but when I think for me it's just the key behind or why I sound a bit frustrated is because when someone brings it up and then the answer is we should do more outreach, it's like someone saying, hey, I'm incredibly ill, why don't you have some tea? Like it's like I understand, yeah, outreach is good, but it won't solve a structural problem that is not enough funding is going towards diversity inclusion, and that's the point I hope just comes across. And thank you all.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we recognise that this does take an order of magnitude greater effort, and that's both in resources, that's in commitment from people, and that's in the degree of consensus we have amongst the community. This requires a step change to achieve it, certainly.
And there are many axes on which there's diversity, right? So there's, you can list 12 real quickly, and we're not going to be able to do them all at once. So we're going to, fits and starts and try to make things better. But that's kind of our goal with trying to get more money to do things, right? That drains the queue. Oh,
he was first over there.
I was.
The gentleman over there was
sorry.
first.
Pat, first. Thanks.
I'm Pat Kane. My computer died.
Yeah.
High-tech stuff. To deal with some of the issues that you're talking about, I think you have to think of it differently. In the 80s and 90s, back when nobody had gray hair, everybody was funded to come to the IETF, and you could go to 6 or 7 because some government agency or somebody was giving you lots of money for it. In the 2000s, there were all these little companies who said, oh my God, you have to go to IETF because we're going to tell our VCs we have an RFC. And my God, they'll like buy us for $80 billion. And that's changed to the part where a lot of people now don't know the history or how things work or stuff like that. And when you talk to somebody, I talked to somebody and said, I'm going to the IETF for the first time in 20 years. And everybody said, wow, what's that? And I can't point at their computer and say, thank God for the IETF because your computer works. And so I would think about putting some push into publicity. Do the, hey, this is the IETF. This is why you want to send your people there. And some of the DEI stuff, some of the money things and stuff like that may just follow through once everybody gets back on the, hey, we actually know what this is.
Okay. Take it under advisement. Cool.
Hello, it's Peter Thomason. So I guess we're over the meeting time, which is why my on-site tool link already disappeared, so I'm not on the list. So I find that this diversity discussion is very much focused on money, and I'm a great proponent of diversity, but I think that there is many reasons why diversity could be lacking. One could be money for some people, and then for other people there might be other obstacles. And I think it would be quite worthwhile to, I mean, I don't know, perhaps this has been done, but to look into why actually people feel or are underrepresented, and then try to remove those barriers, which might include spending money on removing those, but it's not the same thing as giving stipends. So it's just an observation from the discussion, and I wanted to make that point. And another observation is, it's been pointed out that some people come once or twice and then they don't come back. Maybe it's because it's not what they were looking for. I mean, that could also happen. So I think we shouldn't jump to conclusions in such matters.
Yeah, I apologize if I slant the conversation to talk about money. I'm the treasurer, so that's why it's in the forefront of my mind. So I apologize if that's how it's coming off.
I think we're going to close the queue also after Warren.
So Warren Kumari, somewhat responding to what Tara said, yes, I think we should try and make sure that people can come, but we also need to make really sure that when they do come, they feel welcome. So we should all make sure that, when somebody arrives, if they're a newcomer or not, that we're actually being nice to them and treating them like people. That's it.
All right, cool. Great. Sure. Be quick, but that's be quick. Yeah.
It's a very quick response. Okay, so it's important that they feel welcome, but also let's not also infantilize all the incredible people that could be here in this room but can't be here. There is a significant resource problem to coming here, and I mean, I can speak for myself. I can deal with a couple of mean people when I come here. It's not a big deal. I've dealt with much worse in my life. It's still a problem. It should be solved, but it's not as for me. I just feel like it's not coming across the fact that the money challenge is, or it's not normal to meet 3 times a year in really expensive hotels in different places. That's not accessible to everyone, and I just want to make sure that that's clear. And until this is the only way that this work is being done, that imbalance needs to be addressed some way.
Okay. All right, thanks. We've closed the queue, and I believe we're last on the agenda for tonight.
We are.
So have a great dinner.
Oh, you know, put this thing up.
Right.